There's been a lot of talk about whether the 7.8 unemployment number for the end of September was cooked for the purposes of the Obama campaign. A lot of people were suspicious about this. I like to give my take on this because I haven't heard anybody really explain it. Why were they suspicious? Well, of course, all of a sudden Obama needs the number to come down below 8%, and magically it comes down to 7.8. So they raised this question. For example, Jack Welch said that the Chicago guys couldn't win the debate, so they changed the numbers. The press jumped on him and asked him for proof. They asked him, well, how can you question the integrity of these employees from the Labor Bureau of Statistics? And he backed down. Now, of course, there was no conspiracy that was managed by the Obama campaign. But that doesn't mean there wasn't a conspiracy. There's such a thing as a spontaneous conspiracy. Let me explain what that means, and that's what I think probably happened. Individuals of the 2,200 that work for compile this statistic and make these 60,000 calls that compile the data, some of the people that made the call and some of the people that took the call could easily lie and change the figures, change the data, massage the numbers. Why would they do that? Well, it's obvious that a lot of people are politically committed to Obama's campaign. Most of the people in the Bureau of Labor Statistics are Democrats. And so there's an incentive, a temptation to lie for a good cause. Now, this is nothing new. People often lie for what they consider to be a good cause. So I personally think that a certain amount of people did lie, and they did massage the numbers, and they were cooked, and that's the only thing that explains why the unemployment rate went down so much. And I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is so that you can know that I really believe it. Now, I'd like to know how many people on the other side of this issue are willing to put their money where their mouth is. And I'm talking about this specific bet. I bet you that end of November unemployment rate will magically go up to 8% or more. That the September number, end of September number, will be revised, and once it's politically irrelevant, they will up the number over 8 or 8%. So how many of you are willing to take that bet that disagree with me? That's the question. So why am I willing to make this bet? Well, the first thing is that 114,000 new jobs is not enough for the unemployment number to come down. Now, how is this unemployment rate compiled? What does it mean? It is the relationship between the number of people that are looking for work and cannot find it, that's the numerator, and the denominator, the number of people that have found jobs, the number of people that are working. So there's only two ways for this number to come down, and it is if less people are looking for work, which is what happened the month before. It came down from 8.3 to 8.1 because an enormous amount of people left the labor force and were not looking for work, so the unemployment rate went down. But it wasn't a good thing. It was a horrible thing because it meant that less people were looking for work, less people will then be working, and therefore that's worse for the economy. But in this case, it was different. I don't think they claimed that a lot of people left the workforce. What they claimed was a lot of people came into the workforce, new jobs. And so I don't really think that this actually happened because the number that they published was 114,000 new jobs. And that will not support a reduction from 8.1 to 7.8. Now, Welch made this case. He said, every economist that studied this did not make this prediction. The economists, what did they say? The consensus was between the consensus was actually 115,000 new jobs. Now, that will not support bringing the rate down. And this consensus of the economists was accompanied by a prediction of what the unemployment rate would be, and none of them, out of 20 or more, said that the unemployment rate would be lower. Why is it that they didn't say it? Because 115,000 does not bring the rate down to 7.8. It would have stayed at 8.1, and some actually thought that it was going to go up higher. So that doesn't make any sense. The other thing is that when you look at these new jobs that were compiled by this household survey, most of these jobs are part-time jobs. And if I remember the numbers correctly, they claim that there was 150,000 new jobs, most of which were part-time. Part-time can mean that somebody calls you and you say, did you do any new work? And you say, yes. And they say, well, what did you do? I mowed the lawn of my neighbor. That's a part-time job. These part-time jobs can be easily massaged and changed up and down. 550 part-time new jobs? I don't believe it. I think it was just massaged. And the real number, which is the 114,000 number that was published, is credible. But this other number is totally out of whack. So those are the reasons why I think that the number was cooked, and I'm willing to make the bet. And why don't you ask a few of the people that think that wasn't cooked and say that the number at the end of November will not go back up. See if they're willing to take the bet. Now, this is not the only spontaneous conspiracy that is harming our country. The more important one is the one going on with the press. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that the individual members of the press decide to slant the news in favor of the Obama administration and in favor of the liberal views that they hold. And I'll give you a really good example, which is not only do they slant it, but they make it impossible for the people to understand the issue. Let's start with their position. I'm talking about the press. They would like increased spending year after year. That's what they want. They're liberals. They want to spend more every year. So what do? They make it so the people cannot even understand the issue of reducing spending. How do they do that? Well, when the Obama administration, and for that matter, many other politicians, Romney, etc., say they're going to reduce spending by X amount of trillion in the next 10 years, they go ahead and publish this, say that the politician is proposing to reduce spending, when in fact the politician is not proposing to reduce spending. He's only proposing to reduce the rate of increase in spending. So none of these politicians that are talking about reductions in spending of 4 trillion, 5 trillion, 1 trillion, sequester, none of them are going to reduce spending. The only person who was going to reduce spending was Ron Paul. And when I interviewed Wolf Blitzer, you could see that finally he admitted that Ron Paul is the only one who was proposing to reduce spending year to year. That means that next year we'll spend less money than this year. That's a real reduction in spending. To reduce the rate of increase in spending is not to reduce spending at all. So these people call reduction in spending things that are not reduction in spending. So how can the American people understand the issue when they think that all these people are talking about reducing spending when they actually aren't? Now that will really confuse the people, and that's what I call a real spontaneous conspiracy. And there's a lot of other examples. I won't go into them one by one. But conspiracies there are. They're not planned and organized. They are spontaneous. Now, the liberal and progressives are quite familiar with this concept of a spontaneous conspiracy. They refer to it regularly and they complain bitterly. When? When two gasoline merchants decide to have the same price, they complain that they did price fixing, which is, by the way, illegal. But so they know that this happens, that people conspire spontaneously, individually. So why is it that they don't know that it is an important and probable result or fact that there was a conspiracy with these unemployment numbers? Well, because they don't want to know. So that's my analysis.